The kiss happened at exactly 6:47 p.m. on a Friday evening, right outside the glass-fronted lobby of Hale Meridian Technologies in Scottsdale, Arizona. Loretta Hayes was standing on the sidewalk, car keys in her hand, laptop bag over her shoulder, minding her own business. She had just finished a 10-hour shift. Her feet were tired. Her brain was fried from staring at data models all day. All she wanted was to drive home, take a shower, heat up leftover pasta, and fall asleep watching something mindless on her phone. That is not what happened. Because John Whitfield was leaning against her car. He was wearing a slim-fit navy blazer, fresh haircut, cologne she could smell from 20 feet away. He looked good and he knew it. He always knew it. That was half the problem. Loretta stopped walking the moment she saw him. Her stomach dropped, not from attraction, from exhaustion, the emotional kind. The kind that comes from dealing with a man who cannot take no for an answer. "John," she said flatly, "what are you doing here?" He pushed off her car and walked toward her with his hands up like he was approaching a wild animal. "Just hear me out. 5 minutes. That is all I am asking." "I have heard you out, multiple times. We are done." "Loretta, come on. You moved to a whole new city without telling me. You changed your number. You blocked me on everything. Do you not think that is a little extreme?" "I think it is exactly the right amount of extreme for a man who cheated on me twice." John winced. He always winced when she brought that up, like the truth was something physically painful to him. "I made mistakes, I know that, but I have been working on myself. I started therapy. I am reading books. I am not the same man I was 6 months ago." Loretta looked at him, really looked at him. He was handsome. He had always been handsome. Tall, brown skin, perfect teeth, the kind of smile that made women in restaurants turn their heads. She had loved that face once. She had trusted that face. And that face had lied to her over and over again until she did not recognize herself in the mirror anymore. "Good for you," she said. "I am happy you are growing. Grow away from me." She tried to step around him. He grabbed her hand. "John, let go of me. Just listen to me for 1 second." "Let go." He did not let go. Instead, he pulled her toward him and kissed her. Hard, fast, his lips pressed against hers before she could react. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3, long enough. Loretta shoved him backward with both hands. He stumbled. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, her eyes blazing. "Do not ever touch me again," she said. Her voice was low and controlled, but her hands were shaking. "I swear to God, John, if you show up here again, if you come near my job, if you come near my apartment, I will file a restraining order so fast your therapist will need a therapist." John opened his mouth to respond, but something in her face stopped him. He had pushed too far, and even he knew it. He held up his hands, took a step back, and said nothing. Loretta got in her car, slammed the door, and pulled out of the parking lot without looking back. She did not cry. She was past crying over John Whitfield. But she was so focused on getting away from him that she never thought to look up. If she had, she would have seen a figure standing at the floor-to-ceiling window on the top floor of Hale Meridian Technologies. A man in a dark suit, phone forgotten in his hand, jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck were visible from across the room. Seojin Park had seen everything. He had not meant to. He had been on a call with a supplier in Busan when movement outside the building caught his eye. He had glanced down and seen Loretta. He always noticed Loretta, even when he told himself he was not looking, and then he saw the man. Tall, confident, leaning against her car like he belonged there. Seojin had watched the conversation he could not hear. He watched the body language. He watched the man grab her hand. He watched the kiss. His grip on the phone tightened until the case cracked. Then he watched Loretta shove the man away. He watched her wipe her mouth. He watched her get in her car and leave. And something inside his chest shifted, not softened, not warmed, but shifted like a lock turning. Like a door opening that was supposed to stay shut. Seojin set his phone down on his desk. He pressed his knuckles into the dark wood surface and stood there for a full minute, breathing slowly, deliberately, the way he breathed when he was forcing himself not to react. Then he picked up his phone and called Kwan. Kwan answered on the first ring. He always answered on the first ring. "The woman who just left the building," Seojin said. His voice was calm, dangerously calm. The kind of calm that Kwan had learned over 15 years to be very, very careful around. "The man who was with her in the parking lot. I want to know who he is. Everything. By morning." There was a pause. Kwan was not stupid. He knew exactly which woman Seojin was talking about. He had noticed the way Seojin's gaze lingered on the junior data strategist from the 15th floor. He had noticed the way Seojin always seemed to know when she was in the building and when she was not. Kwan had been waiting for this moment for months. He had hoped it would never come. "The woman from the 15th floor," Kwan asked carefully. Seojin did not answer. He just hung up. Kwan closed his eyes and muttered something in Korean that roughly translated to, "Here we go." 15 floors below, Loretta was already on the highway, gripping her steering wheel, replaying the encounter in her head. She was angry at John for showing up. She was angry at herself for not seeing it coming. She was angry that after 6 months of distance, 6 months of rebuilding, 6 months of becoming the version of herself she actually liked, he could still make her feel small just by standing too close. She turned up the radio and drove home. She had no idea that the most powerful man in her building had just watched her kiss another man. She had no idea that he had been quietly, silently, obsessively aware of her for months. And she had absolutely no idea that by Monday morning, everything about her life was going to change. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone you cared about with someone else, and it just cracked something inside you that you could not explain? If that hit you somewhere real, go ahead and smash that like button right now. And if you are not subscribed yet, what are you even doing? Hit subscribe, because this story is about to go places you are not ready for. Trust me. Monday morning, 8:15 a.m. Loretta walked through the lobby of Hale Meridian Technologies with her head high and her coffee in her hand. Oat milk, 1 sugar. The same order she had gotten every morning for the past 8 months since she started working here. She was wearing a fitted camel blazer over a cream turtleneck, gold hoop earrings, and her natural coils pulled into a low twist-out that framed her face perfectly. Minimal makeup, just enough to look polished without looking like she tried too hard. The security guard at the front desk, a man named Raymond who had worked in the building for 12 years, looked up as she passed and lost his train of thought mid-sentence. He had been talking to the delivery guy about football. He completely forgot what he was saying. This was not unusual. People looked at Loretta. They always had. She had the kind of beauty that was not loud or flashy. It was structural. Deep brown skin that caught light like it was made for it. Full lips. Cheekbones that looked sculpted. Large, dark eyes that made people feel like she could see right through them. She was not tall, maybe 5'6", but she carried herself like she was 6 feet, shoulders back, chin up, every step deliberate. People in the office talked about her. Not in a malicious way. More in a confused way, like they could not figure out why a woman who looked like that was sitting quietly at a desk on the 15th floor running data models, instead of walking a runway somewhere in New York. Loretta did not care what people thought about her appearance. She had learned a long time ago that being beautiful did not protect you from anything. It did not stop your father from walking out. It did not stop your boyfriend from cheating. It did not pay your student loans or fill your refrigerator. Hard work did that. Focus did that. And Loretta had both in excess. She grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, East Side. Her mother, Denise, had raised Loretta and her younger sister, Monique, alone after their father left when Loretta was 9. No warning. No note, just an empty closet and a missing car one Tuesday morning. Denise worked 2 jobs, receptionist during the day, hospital janitor at night, and still managed to make sure her girls did their homework, ate real food, and understood that no one was coming to save them. They had to save themselves. Loretta took that lesson and ran with it. She graduated top of her class in high school, got a full scholarship to Ohio State, majored in data analytics, and graduated with honors. She worked at a consulting firm in Cleveland for 2 years after college before landing the job at Hale Meridian 8 months ago. The move to Scottsdale was supposed to be a fresh start, away from Cleveland, away from the version of herself that tolerated being treated less than she deserved, away from John Whitfield and every single thing he represented. John had not been a bad boyfriend in the obvious ways. He did not yell. He did not throw things. He was charming and attentive and knew exactly what to say to make her feel like the only woman in the world. But he also cheated on her twice, once with a coworker, once with a woman he met at a bar, and both times, when Loretta found out, he turned it around on her. Made her feel like she was overreacting. Made her feel like her anger was the problem, not his betrayal. He would apologize with flowers and planned speeches that sounded rehearsed because they were. And twice, she stayed. She hated herself for staying, but she did. The third time, she did not stay. She packed her things, moved to Arizona, changed her number, and blocked him on every platform she could think of. She thought that was the end. Friday night proved it was not. She sat down at her desk on the 15th floor, put on her headphones, and opened her laptop. She was not going to think about John. She was going to think about the Kessler Brandt account, which was due for a full strategic review by Wednesday. Meanwhile, 14 floors above her, Seo-Jin Park was sitting at his desk, reading a file that Kwan had placed there at 7:00 a.m. The file was on John Whitfield, 29 years old, real estate agent based in Phoenix, licensed for 3 years, mediocre sales record. 2 previous girlfriends had filed informal complaints about controlling behavior, nothing criminal, nothing that resulted in charges, but a pattern that was clear if you knew what to look for. Currently living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Tempe. Drove a leased BMW. Had $42,000 in credit card debt. Seo-Jin read every page. Then he closed the file, slid it into his desk drawer, and locked it. He sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Seo-Jin Park was 31 years old, born in Seoul, South Korea. Raised between Seoul and Manhattan after his father relocated the family's business interests to the United States when Seo-Jin was 12. His mother, a woman named Yuna, died of cancer when he was 14. His father, Park Yi-won, was one of the most connected figures in the Korean underground, a man who built a legitimate empire on top of an illegitimate one and never let the two touch in public. When Yi-won died of a heart attack 3 years ago, Seo-Jin inherited everything. The legitimate company, Hale Meridian Technologies, a billion-dollar tech acquisitions firm with offices in Scottsdale and contracts across the country. And the other thing, the network, the syndicate, weapons brokerage, intelligence trading, territorial control stretching from the West Coast to parts of the Midwest. An operation so carefully hidden that not a single journalist, law enforcement agency, or competitor had ever connected it to the clean, polished company that bore the Hale Meridian name. Seo-Jin ran both empires with surgical precision. He was quiet, controlled, and deliberate. He never raised his voice. He never made threats he did not intend to follow through on. He never drank more than 1 glass of anything. He exercised at 5:00 a.m. every morning. He read for 1 hour every night before bed. He wore dark, perfectly tailored suits that fit him like a second skin. He was lean, sharp-featured, with dark eyes that gave away nothing, and a jawline that could cut glass. Women noticed him. He did not notice them back. He had trained himself not to. Attachment was a vulnerability. His father had taught him that. His mother's death had confirmed it. The people you love become the weapons others use against you. And then Loretta Hayes walked into his building 8 months ago, and every rule he had built his life around started to crack. He first noticed her in the lobby during her first week. She was waiting for the elevator, holding a coffee, reading something on her phone. She was wearing a simple black dress and flats, nothing expensive, nothing flashy, and she was the most striking woman he had ever seen in his life. Not because of any single feature, because of the way she stood. Like she had already fought every fight that mattered and won, and she was just waiting for the next one. He memorized her face in 3 seconds and spent the next 8 months pretending he had not. He learned her name from the company directory. He learned her schedule from the building's access logs. He learned that she stayed late on Wednesdays, that she took the stairs instead of the elevator when the wait was longer than 2 minutes, that she brought her lunch from home most days but ordered from the Thai place across the street on Fridays. He never spoke to her. He never introduced himself. He kept his distance because he knew what he was, and he knew that a woman like Loretta Hayes did not belong anywhere near his world. But on Friday night, standing at his window, watching another man put his mouth on hers, something inside Seo-jin broke free from the cage he had built around it, and he could not put it back. At 10:30 a.m. on Monday morning, Seo-jin did something he had never done before. He left his office on the top floor, took the elevator down to the 15th floor, and walked through the data strategy department. The reaction was immediate. People froze. Conversations stopped. Keyboards went silent. Seo-jin Park did not visit individual floors. He was the CEO. He existed in a different atmosphere. Seeing him walk through their department was like seeing a shark swim through a koi pond. Loretta had her headphones on. She was deep in a spreadsheet. She did not notice the silence around her. She did not notice the man in the dark suit walking between the rows of desks with his hands in his pockets, his posture straight, his eyes scanning the room with the calm precision of someone who was used to surveying territory. When she finally looked up, Seo-jin was standing 6 feet from her desk, looking directly at her. Their eyes met. He held her gaze for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds does not sound like a long time. It is an eternity when the most powerful man in your building is staring at you without blinking. "You are the strategist on the Kessler Brand account," he said. Loretta pulled her headphones down. "Yes, sir." He nodded once. His expression did not change. "Good work on the Q3 projections." Then he turned and walked away, back through the department, back to the elevator, back to the top floor. Loretta's coworker Priya rolled her chair over so fast she almost crashed into Loretta's desk. "Did Seo-jin Park just come down here and compliment you? He has never been on this floor. In the entire time I have worked here. Not once." Loretta shrugged. He probably reviewed the report and had a comment. "Loretta, the man has department heads for that. He does not walk 14 floors to tell a junior strategist good job. That is not how any of this works." Loretta waved her off and put her headphones back on. But her heart was beating faster than it should have been, and she did not know why. She told herself it was just the surprise, just the unexpectedness of it. That was all. That evening, she walked to her car in the parking garage. It was 7:00 p.m. The garage was mostly empty. Her footsteps echoed on the concrete. There was a white envelope tucked under her windshield wiper. Loretta frowned. She pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with a typed message. "He doesn't deserve to touch you." Loretta looked around the garage. Empty, silent, her skin prickled. She got in her car, locked the doors immediately, and sat there for a full minute, reading the note over and over. She assumed it was John, some kind of manipulative guilt trip, something to keep her off balance. She pulled out her phone and texted him, "Stay away from me or I am filing a restraining order. I mean it." John replied 15 minutes later with a string of confused question marks. "What are you talking about? I haven't done anything. I went home Friday night and I've been here all weekend." Loretta stared at his response. She did not believe him, but something about the note felt different from John's style. John was emotional and sloppy. This note was clean, precise, clinical. She drove home, locked every lock on her apartment door, and sat on her couch staring at the note until midnight. She did not sleep well. What she did not know, what she had no way of knowing, was that the note was not from John, and it was not from Seo-jin either. It was from someone else entirely, someone inside the building, someone who had been watching both of them. Over the next 2 weeks, Seo-jin began engineering reasons to be near Loretta. He started with the Kessler Brand account. He sent a formal request through the department head that he wanted a full strategic review presented directly to him, and he specifically wanted the lead strategist on the account to deliver it, not the department head, not a senior analyst, the person who actually built the models and crunched the numbers. Loretta. This was unusual. Priya told Loretta it was unusual. The department head, a man named Victor Marsh, told Loretta it was unusual. But no one questioned the CEO's request. That was not how things worked at Hale Meridian. Loretta spent 3 days preparing. She reviewed every data point. She rebuilt 2 of her models from scratch to make them cleaner. She rehearsed her presentation in her bathroom mirror until she could deliver it without looking at her notes. She was not nervous because of Seo-jin specifically. She was nervous because this was her career, and she had worked too hard to mess it up in front of the man who signed her paychecks. On Thursday afternoon at 2:00 p.m., she took the elevator to the top floor. Seo-jin's office was at the end of a long hallway with polished dark floors and minimal decoration. The door was open. She knocked anyway. "Come in," he said. The office was large but not ostentatious. Dark wood desk, 2 leather chairs, a single framed piece of Korean calligraphy on the wall behind him. She did not know what it said, but the brushstrokes were beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows showing the Scottsdale skyline, the desert stretching out beyond the city like a painting. Seo-jin was standing behind his desk when she entered. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please." She sat, she opened her laptop, she began. For the next 40 minutes, Loretta walked him through every aspect of the Kessler-Brandt strategic review: market positioning, competitive analysis, revenue projections, risk assessments. She was thorough, precise, and confident. She did not stumble. She did not ramble. She presented like someone who knew her material cold and respected his time enough not to waste it. Seo-jin listened without interrupting. Not once. He sat perfectly still in his chair, his hands folded on the desk in front of him, his dark eyes tracking her face as she spoke. When she gestured to emphasize a point, his gaze followed her hands. When she paused to let a data point land, he held the silence instead of filling it. Kwan was standing near the door, arms crossed, observing. He had known Seo-jin since they were 17, since the early days in Manhattan, since Seo-jin's father was still alive, since before the empire, before the suits, before all of it. He had seen Seo-jin negotiate with arms dealers without blinking. He had seen Seo-jin face down threats from rival organizations with the emotional range of a stone wall. He had never seen Seo-jin look at anyone the way he was looking at Loretta Hayes right now. When the presentation was finished, Seo-jin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That is the most thorough strategic analysis I have seen from anyone in this company in 2 years." Loretta felt heat rise to her cheeks, but kept her expression professional. "Thank you, sir. I want you to lead a new project, a direct report role, the Wellington Cross acquisition. You would report to me personally on the strategic framework." Loretta's hands stilled on her laptop. A direct report role to the CEO, for a junior strategist who had been at the company for less than a year. This was not a normal career progression. This was a catapult. She hesitated, not because she doubted her ability, because something about being that close to Seo-jin made her feel like she was stepping into a spotlight she had not turned on. There was something in the way he looked at her, not predatory, not inappropriate, but focused. Intensely focused. Like she was the only thing in the room that mattered, and he was trying very hard not to let her know it. "I would be honored," she said. He nodded. "Kwan will send you the preliminary files." She stood, he stood. Their eyes met again, and for a brief moment the professional distance between them felt paper-thin. Then she nodded, gathered her things, and left. When the door closed behind her, Kwan did not move. He waited. He knew Seo-jin would speak first. Seo-jin sat back down and stared at the closed door. "Don't," he said. "I did not say anything," Kwan replied. "You were about to." Kwan uncrossed his arms. "She is smart, she is capable, and you are in trouble. She is an employee. She is a problem, for you specifically, and you just created a reason to see her every week." Seo-jin did not respond. Kwan took that as confirmation of everything he already knew and left the office without another word. 2 days later, the second anonymous note appeared. This time, it was not on Loretta's car. It was slipped under her apartment door. Loretta found it when she came home from the gym on Saturday afternoon. Same white envelope, same typed message. different words. You are being watched, and not by who you think. Loretta stood in her doorway holding the note, and for the first time, she felt genuinely afraid. This was not John. John did not know where she lived. She had moved to Scottsdale without telling him her new address. She had been careful. She had been deliberate. There was no way he could have found her apartment. Which meant someone else was leaving these notes. Someone who knew where she lived. Someone who had been inside her building, walked down her hallway, and stood at her door. She called her sister Monique in Cleveland. Monique picked up on the second ring. "Someone is leaving me notes," Loretta said. She explained everything, the first note on her car, the second one under her door, the messages. Monique's voice went sharp immediately. "Call the police, right now." "And tell them what? Someone left me 2 typed notes. They are going to tell me it is not a crime." "Loretta, someone knows where you live. That is not okay." "I know it is not okay. I'm handling it." She installed a Ring camera at her front door that night. She also started locking her windows, even though she was on the 3rd floor. She slept with her phone on her pillow and a knife in her nightstand drawer. At work, the dynamic between Loretta and Seojin shifted during their weekly project meetings. The conversations started professional, always professional, but they began to stretch at the edges. He asked where she went to school. She told him Ohio State. He told her he studied at Columbia but dropped out after his father died to take over the company. She asked how old he was when that happened. 28, he said. She said that was young to carry that much weight. He looked at her like no one had ever acknowledged that before. She laughed at something dry and understated he said about a competitor's financial report, and the sound of her laugh did something to him physically. His hand gripped the armrest of his chair. His jaw tightened. He had to look away. Loretta noticed him look away. She did not know why. She thought maybe she had been too informal. She straightened in her chair and went back to the data. But the truth was simpler and more dangerous than informality. Seojin was falling, not slowly, not gradually. He was falling the way buildings fall all at once, from the inside out, with no way to stop it once it started. And he knew it. And he knew it was the most dangerous thing that had ever happened to him. Not because Loretta was a threat, because Loretta was a vulnerability. And in his world, vulnerabilities got people killed. 3 weeks after the parking lot incident, John showed up at the office. He walked into the Hale Meridian lobby at 11:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, wearing a charcoal suit and carrying a bouquet of white roses. He smiled at the receptionist like he belonged there. He told her his name was John Whitfield, and he was here to see Loretta Hayes. The receptionist asked if he had an appointment. "I am her boyfriend," he said. The receptionist hesitated. Company policy required visitors to be cleared by the employee they were visiting. She called up to the 15th floor. Loretta answered. "There is a John Whitfield in the lobby for you," the receptionist said. "He says he is your boyfriend." Loretta's blood went cold. She closed her eyes for 1 second, then she said, "I will be right down." She took the elevator to the lobby. When the doors opened, and she saw John standing there with those roses, and that smile, the expression on her face could have frozen steel. She walked straight past him and out the front door. He followed. She stopped on the sidewalk, 10 feet from the entrance, and turned to face him. "You need to leave," she said. Her voice was low and tight. "Right now." "Loretta, I just want to talk. I brought you flowers. Can we just—" "You told the receptionist you are my boyfriend. You are not my boyfriend. You are a man I broke up with 6 months ago who cannot take a hint, take a direct statement, or take a restraining order threat seriously. I am not trying to cause problems. I just miss you. That is not a crime. Showing up at my workplace uninvited is close enough. John, this is my career. This is the thing I built from scratch. You do not get to walk in here and jeopardize it because you are lonely." John's expression shifted. The charm dimmed. Something harder appeared underneath it. "You are being dramatic. I drove 40 minutes to bring you flowers and you are treating me like a stalker. If you show up one more time, I will not be treating you like anything. My lawyer will." John stepped closer. He reached for her arm. "Loretta." "Do not touch me. He grabbed her arm anyway. Not hard, not violently, but firmly enough that she could not pull away without making a scene. What neither of them knew was that the lobby had a full array of high-definition security cameras. The feeds ran to a bank of monitors in Kwan's office on the top floor, and Seo-jin was standing directly behind Kwan's chair, watching every frame. He had seen John enter the building. He had watched him speak to the receptionist. He had watched Loretta come down in the elevator, her face tight with anger. And now he was watching John grab Loretta's arm on the sidewalk. Seo-jin's expression did not change. His body did not move. But Kwan, who was sitting 2 feet in front of him, felt the temperature in the room drop. "Building security," Seo-jin said. "Remove him from the premises. If he returns, he does not get past the parking lot entrance." Kwan made the call. 30 seconds later, 2 uniformed security guards walked through the lobby doors and approached John on the sidewalk. "Sir, you are not authorized to be on this property. We are going to have to ask you to leave." John let go of Loretta's arm. He looked at the guards, then back at Loretta. "You called security on me." "I did not call anyone," Loretta said, and she meant it. She had no idea who sent them. The guards escorted John to his car. He went, but not quietly. He threw the roses in a trash can on the way. He looked back at Loretta one more time, a look that was half heartbreak, half resentment, and then he drove away. Loretta stood on the sidewalk for a moment, her arm still warm where he had grabbed it. She was embarrassed, frustrated, exhausted in a way that sleep could not fix. She went back inside, took the elevator to the 15th floor, and put her head on her desk. Priya brought her tea without asking and did not say a word. At 3:00 p.m., Loretta's desk phone rang. It was Seo-jin's assistant. The CEO wanted to see her. She took the elevator up, expecting a conversation about the Wellington Cross project. She walked into his office. He was standing by the window. He turned when she entered. "Close the door, please," he said. She closed it. He did not ask about the project. He did not mention the presentation or the data models or the strategic framework. He looked at her and said, "Are you all right?" Loretta blinked. "I'm sorry." "The man in the lobby. Are you all right?" She straightened. "I am fine. I apologize for the disruption. It will not happen again." Seo-jin shook his head slowly. "That is not why I asked you up here. I do not care about the disruption. I asked if you are all right." The question hit differently the second time. It was not a professional inquiry. It was personal. And the way he said it, steady, direct, his dark eyes holding hers without wavering, made Loretta feel something she was not prepared for. Like someone was actually seeing her. Not her face. Not her work. Her. "I am handling it," she said quietly. He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "If he bothers you again at work or anywhere else, tell me. Not HR, me." Loretta stared at him. The weight of that sentence hung between them like a physical thing. She did not know what to do with it. She did not know what it meant. Or maybe she did, and that was the part that scared her. "Okay," she said. He nodded. She left. When the door closed behind her, Seo-jin pressed both palms flat against his desk and exhaled slowly. He had just crossed a line. Not a professional one. Those lines meant nothing to him. A personal one. He had offered her something that had nothing to do with being her boss and everything to do with being a man who could not stand the thought of another man's hands on her. He had shown his hand. And for someone who had survived his entire life by never showing his hand, this was the most dangerous thing he had done in years. That night, the third note arrived. Loretta found it under her apartment door at 9:00 p.m. Her Ring camera had been recording all day. She pulled up the footage on her phone and scrubbed through it. At 6:42 p.m., the feed went black for exactly 45 seconds. When it came back, the envelope was already on the floor inside her door. Someone had disabled her camera, professionally, precisely, for just long enough. She opened the envelope. The note read, "He is not who you think he is. Ask about the basement level." Loretta read it 3 times. Her hands were shaking. She sat on her couch in the dark and stared at the wall and tried to make sense of what was happening to her life. Someone knew where she lived. Someone could disable her security camera. Someone was warning her about something, or someone at her workplace. And the phrase basement level echoed in her head like a bell she could not unring. She did not sleep that night, not even for a minute. Loretta spent the next week paying attention to everything. She had always been observant, you had to be, growing up the way she did, but now she was operating on a different level. She watched. She listened. She cataloged details that she had previously dismissed as unimportant. She noticed that Quan was always near Seojin, but his posture and movements were nothing like an executive assistant's. He moved like a bodyguard, alert, positioned, scanning rooms before entering them. His hands were rough and calloused in a way that did not match a man who spent his days scheduling meetings and managing calendars. She noticed that certain men appeared on the executive floor who were not in the company directory. She checked. She had access to the employee database as part of her strategic work. These men were not listed anywhere. They wore dark suits and had earpieces and spoke in Korean, and they came and went at odd hours. She noticed the deliveries. After 8:00 p.m., when the building was mostly empty, unmarked vehicles would pull into the service entrance at the back of the building. They did not go to the loading dock on the first floor. They went lower, to a level that Loretta had never accessed, a level that was not marked on any floor map she had ever seen. The basement level. For 10 days, she told herself it was none of her business. She told herself she was being paranoid. She told herself the anonymous notes were messing with her head, and she was seeing conspiracies where there were none. But Loretta Hayes was not the kind of woman who could ignore a question once it had been asked. She had been built to dig, to analyze, to find the truth in the data. And this was just another data set, one with missing variables and incomplete inputs that her brain would not let go of. On a Thursday evening, she stayed late at the office. She told Priya she wanted to finish a report. When the 15th floor emptied out at 7:00 p.m., she waited another hour. At 8:15 p.m., she took the service stairwell down. Past the lobby, past the parking garage, down to the sub-basement level. The door at the bottom of the stairs required a keycard. She did not have one, but someone had propped it open with a small rubber wedge, the kind maintenance workers used to keep doors from locking behind them. Either someone was careless or someone wanted her to get in. In hindsight, she should have considered the second possibility more carefully. She slipped through. The hallway beyond the door was stark. White walls, bright fluorescent lighting, no signage, no windows. Her heels clicked on polished concrete and the sound felt obscenely loud in the silence. The hallway opened into a large room, and what Loretta saw stopped her in her tracks. It was not a storage room. It was not a maintenance area. It was a fully operational command center. Banks of monitors lined one wall, showing live surveillance feeds from locations she did not recognize, buildings, intersections, parking lots, warehouses in different cities. A table in the center held maps with colored markers and annotations in Korean. Phone banks along the far wall, 2 of which were currently manned by men in plain clothes speaking rapid Korean into headsets. Crates stacked against the back wall, unmarked, sealed with industrial tape. Loretta's blood went cold. She did not fully understand what she was looking at. She did not know the specifics, but she understood enough. She understood that this was not part of a tech acquisitions company. She understood that Hale Meridian Technologies, the clean, legitimate, award-winning firm that had recruited her with a competitive salary and stock options, was sitting on top of something that was none of those things. She backed away slowly. She did not run. She did not make a sound. She reached the hallway, pushed through the propped-open door, and started up the stairwell. She made it half a flight before she collided with someone coming down. Quan. He was standing on the landing above her, arms at his sides, his expression completely unreadable. He looked at her. Then he looked at the sub-basement door below her. Then he looked at her again. "You are on the wrong floor, Miss Hayes," he said quietly. Loretta forced her breathing to stay even. "I got turned around. I was looking for the parking garage." Quan studied her face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there, he did not challenge it. He simply said, "The elevators are more reliable. I will walk you." He escorted her up the stairs and through the lobby in complete silence. He held the front door open for her. She stepped outside into the warm Scottsdale night, and her knees almost buckled. She made it to her car. She drove home with her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her fingers were numb by the time she pulled into her parking space. She sat in her apartment and stared at the wall and connected every dot she had been collecting for weeks. The anonymous notes, the warnings. "He is not who you think he is. Ask about the basement level." Whoever was sending those messages knew exactly what Seo-jin was hiding beneath his company. And now Loretta knew too. She thought about calling the police. She thought about calling the FBI. She thought about packing a bag, driving to the airport, and getting on the first flight back to Cleveland. But she did not do any of those things, because something held her in place. Something she could not name yet. Something that had to do with the way Seo-jin looked at her when he asked if she was all right, and the way he said, "Tell me," not HR, me, and the way his hand gripped his armrest when she laughed. She was afraid, but she was not running, not yet. At 10:00 p.m. in his office on the top floor, Seo-jin's phone buzzed. Quan's name on the screen. She went to the lower level, Quan said. She saw the operations room. Seo-jin was silent for so long that Quan checked to make sure the call was still connected. Then Seo-jin asked, very quietly, "How much did she see?" Quan paused. "Enough." The silence that followed was the loudest thing either of them had ever heard. Seo-jin did not sleep that night. He paced his penthouse in Paradise Valley, 5,000 square feet of glass and concrete and cold modern furniture, surrounded by the dark desert hills, a house that felt more like a fortress than a home. He had two options, and both of them were terrible. Option 1, handle the breach the way his organization had always handled breaches, the way his father would have handled it. Clean, quiet, permanent. Loretta would be approached. She would be told in very clear terms what she saw, what would happen if she spoke about it, and what the consequences would be if she became a problem. If necessary, she would be relocated, not voluntarily. Option 2, trust her. Option 1 was safe. Option 2 was insane. Seo-jin chose option 2. And he did not choose it because it was strategic. He chose it because the thought of Loretta looking at him with fear in her eyes made him feel something so close to physical pain that he could not breathe properly. At 9:00 a.m. the next morning, he sent for her. Loretta arrived at his office bracing herself. She had spent the night preparing for every possible scenario, being fired, being threatened, being confronted by men in dark suits who would make her sign something or else. She wore a black blazer-like armor. She kept her hands still at her sides. She walked in with her chin up. Seo-jin was sitting behind his desk. The blinds were closed. The door was shut. Quan was nowhere in sight. "Sit down," Seo-jin said, not unkindly, but not gently either. She sat. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he said something she was not expecting. "Ask me what you want to ask me." Loretta held his gaze. Her heart was hammering, but her voice was steady. "What is in the sub-basement?" And Seo-jin told her. Not everything, but enough. He told her that Hale Meridian Technologies was real. The tech acquisitions, the consulting contracts, the data analytics division, all of it generated legitimate revenue. The company was not a shell. It was not a fake. It was a functioning, profitable business that employed hundreds of people and served real clients. But beneath that surface, Seo-jin controlled a network that his father had built over 30 years. An inherited syndicate operation that dealt in weapons brokerage, intelligence trading, and territorial control across the West Coast. It reached into San Jose, into Seattle, into parts of Las Vegas and Denver. It was not a street gang. It was not chaotic or flashy. It was an organization run with the precision of a Fortune 500 company, because that is exactly what Seo-jin had modeled it after. He told her there were lines he did not cross. He did not deal in narcotics. He did not traffic human beings. He did not target civilians. He had a code inherited from his father, refined by his own principles, and he enforced it absolutely. But he was not a good man, not by any legal definition, and he was not going to pretend otherwise. When he finished, the room was very quiet. Loretta sat perfectly still for nearly a full minute. Then she asked, "Why are you telling me this? You could have just made me disappear." Seo-jin looked at her, and for the first time since she had known him, something in his expression shifted. The mask slipped, not completely, just enough for her to see what was underneath, not a CEO, not a syndicate boss, not a calculated man in a dark suit, just a person, tired, alone, carrying something so heavy that it had reshaped his entire skeleton. "Because I would rather lose everything I have built," he said, "than hurt you, and I need you to know that before you decide what you want to do next." Loretta's breath caught in her chest. This was not a romantic confession. It was something deeper, an admission that she had power over him, that in a world built entirely on control, she was the one thing he could not control. And instead of eliminating that vulnerability, he was sitting across from her with his hands open, telling her the truth. She did not run, she did not cry, she sat with it. She let the weight of it settle into her bones. Then she said, "Who is sending me the notes?" Seo-jin's expression changed instantly. The vulnerability disappeared. The mask snapped back into place. "What notes?" She told him everything, the 3 anonymous messages, the disabled Ring camera, the typed warnings. "He doesn't deserve to touch you. You are being watched. Ask about the basement level." Seo-jin's jaw tightened with every sentence. By the time she finished, his hands were flat on the desk, pressing down so hard that his knuckles were white. He had not known about the notes. He had not authorized them. He had not sent them. Someone with access to his world, his building, his security equipment, was targeting the woman he cared about, and he did not know who. "This is no longer about you and me," he said, his voice flat with cold focus. "Someone inside my operation is using you to get to me. They led you to the sub-basement. They wanted you to find it. They wanted to create a situation where I would have to deal with you, one way or another. This is a power play." He picked up his phone and called Kwan. "My office, now." Kwan arrived in 90 seconds. Seo-jin told him about the notes and gave him a directive: find out who sent them, trace the paper, trace the printer, identify who had access to the frequency jammer used to disable Loretta's Ring camera. Full investigation. No one is exempt from suspicion. He also insisted that Loretta accept a security detail. One person, plainclothes, discreet, someone who would shadow her commute and monitor her building. Loretta resisted. "I did not sign up for this. I do not want someone following me." Seo-jin leaned forward. "The person sending those notes wanted you to find the operations room. They engineered the entire thing. That means they are using you as a tool to destabilize me. And if they are using you, then you are already in danger whether you accept my help or not." She stared at him. She hated that his logic was airtight. She agreed. That night, Seo-jin drove to Loretta's apartment complex himself. He parked his black Audi across the street and sat there in the dark, watching her building, scanning the perimeter, waiting for the security detail to take position. Loretta saw his car from her window. She recognized it. She had seen it in the executive parking section of the garage enough times. She picked up her phone and texted him. She had gotten his number from the project files weeks ago, but had never used it until now. "You can come inside. You don't have to sit out there." He did not reply for 10 minutes. Then, "That would not be appropriate." She almost smiled. She texted back, "Since when do you care about appropriate?" In his car, Seo-jin read the text and felt something crack across his face that he barely recognized. It was almost a smile. He put his phone down. He sat there for another 20 minutes. Then he drove home. Kwan's investigation took 5 days. The results were terrifying. The anonymous notes had been printed on premium paper stock, a specific brand and weight that was used exclusively on Hale Meridian's executive floor. Nowhere else in the building, just the top floor. The frequency jammer used to disable Loretta's Ring camera was a model issued to Seojin's own security team. Only 6 people had access to that equipment. All 6 were vetted, trusted members of the inner circle. Whoever was behind this was not an outsider. They were inside. Close. Possibly sitting in the same meetings, standing in the same hallways, breathing the same air as Seojin every single day. Kwan presented his findings in Seojin's office behind a locked door. He narrowed the suspects to 3. The first was Di-ho, a lieutenant in the organization who had served under Seojin's father for over a decade. Di-ho had never been comfortable with Seojin's leadership. He thought Seojin was too careful, too corporate, too American. He wanted the operation to be more aggressive, more traditional, more like the old ways. He had access to the executive floor and the security equipment. The second was Mr. Yun, a logistics coordinator who managed shipment routes through the Southwest. Yun was efficient and reliable, but Kwan had recently flagged financial irregularities in his accounts, small payments from a source that traced back to a rival syndicate based in San Jose. If Yun had been turned, he could be feeding information and acting on someone else's orders. The third suspect was the most disturbing of all, Hyun-woo Park, Seojin's cousin, 29 years old, the son of Seojin's uncle who had been a senior figure in the organization before his death 5 years ago. When Seojin's father died and Seojin inherited control, Hyun-woo had expected to be elevated. He was not. He was kept in a mid-level operational role, and he had never forgiven Seojin for the slight. He smiled in meetings. He was polite in person. But Kwan had never trusted the quietness of his resentment. Quiet resentment was the most dangerous kind. Seojin listened to the 3 profiles without expression. When Kwan finished, Seojin said, "Watch all 3. Tell me the moment one of them makes a move." Meanwhile, something was happening between Seojin and Loretta that neither of them could stop, even though both of them knew they should. Their project meetings had become the anchor of their weeks. They met every Tuesday and Thursday in his office. The meetings were supposed to last an hour. They lasted 2, sometimes 3. The Wellington Cross project was real and it was demanding, but somewhere in the second hour the conversation would drift. Not dramatically, not obviously, but the edges softened. He told her about growing up in Seoul, about his mother, Yuna, who used to take him to the Bukshan Hanok village on Sundays and buy him red bean pastries. About how when she died, his father stopped speaking for 3 days. Just silence. 3 days of nothing. She told him about Cleveland, about her mother, Denise, working double shifts and still braiding Loretta's hair every Sunday night, about her father's empty closet, about the morning she realized he was not coming back and she decided, at 9 years old, that she would never depend on anyone who could leave. They were not supposed to understand each other this well. They came from different continents, different languages, different worlds. But there was a current running beneath everything, a recognition. They had both been shaped by loss. They had both learned to survive by building walls so high that most people never tried to climb them. One Thursday evening, after a meeting that had stretched past 8:00 p.m., Loretta stood to leave. Seojin stood too. They were close, closer than usual. The desk was not between them anymore. She had moved to the window to look at the city lights while making a point about the acquisition timeline, and he had followed without thinking. Now they were standing 3 feet apart, and the air between them felt charged. Electric, dangerous. He said, "I think about the night I saw you outside this building. That man, the kiss, I think about it more than I should." Loretta's lips parted slightly. "You saw that." "I see everything when it comes to you. I have for months." She should have been unsettled. She should have taken a step back. She did not. "He kissed me," she said quietly. "I did not kiss him. There is a difference." Seojin nodded slowly. "I know. I watched you push him away. That is the only reason that man still walks comfortably." The weight of that statement settled between them. Loretta understood what he was saying, not as a threat, as a fact. She took a step closer. She reached out and placed her hand flat against his chest. His heart was hammering, rapid, hard. She could feel it through his shirt, through the fabric, through the armor he wore every single day. This man, this controlled, composed, unshakable man, had a heart that was racing because she was touching him. "You do not own me, Seojin," she said. "I know. But you can have me, if you ask." He looked down at her hand on his chest. Then he looked at her face. Something passed behind his eyes, want, restraint, and a war between the two that he was barely winning. He took her hand from his chest, lifted it to his mouth, and pressed his lips to her knuckles. Softly, deliberately, like she was something sacred that he was terrified of breaking. "Not until I know you are safe," he said. "I will not pull you into my chaos until I have cleaned it." He let go of her hand. She left his office that night feeling something she had never felt before, wanted by someone powerful enough to take whatever he wanted, who was choosing to wait because he respected her enough to protect her first. But the chaos was not waiting for him to clean it. The chapter ends with Hyun-woo sitting in a parked car outside Loretta's apartment, watching her lights turn on through the third-floor window. He was alone. His phone was in his hand. He made a call. He spoke in Korean. The words translated. "She is the weakness. We move this week." He hung up. He started the car. He drove into the Arizona night. 3 days later, on a Saturday morning, Loretta was taken. She left a coffee shop in Old Town Scottsdale at 9:15 a.m. She had gone out for oat milk lattes and a blueberry scone, a small weekend ritual she had started since moving to Arizona. Something normal, something peaceful, something that reminded her that her life was still hers, even if it had become unrecognizable in the past few weeks. The plainclothes security detail assigned to her, a woman named Jihai who had been with Seojin's organization for 6 years, was 30 seconds behind. The coffee shop had 2 exits. Loretta used the side door out of habit because it was closer to where she parked. Jihai had expected her to use the front door. By the time Jihai adjusted, 30 seconds had passed. 30 seconds was all it took. A black Suburban with tinted windows pulled up to the curb as Loretta stepped onto the sidewalk. 2 men got out. They were fast and professional. One grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms. The other pressed a cloth dampened with something sweet and chemical over her mouth. Loretta fought. She thrashed and kicked and tried to scream, but the cloth muffled everything, and within 4 seconds her body went slack. They put her in the back of the Suburban. The doors closed. The vehicle pulled away from the curb and merged into traffic. 8 seconds, start to finish. Jihai came around the corner just in time to see the Suburban's taillights disappearing down Goldwater Boulevard. She sprinted to her own vehicle, grabbed her phone, and called Kwan. Kwan answered on the first ring. "They took her," Jihai said. Kwan was already moving. He crossed the hall to Seojin's penthouse. Seojin was in the kitchen, drinking coffee, reading a briefing on his tablet. A normal Saturday morning. The last normal moment he would have for a long time. Kwan said 2 words. "They took her." The coffee mug in Seojin's hand did not break. He set it down very carefully on the counter. Precisely. Deliberately. His face did not change. His breathing did not change. But something in his eyes went dark in a way Kwan had only seen twice before in 15 years, and both of those times ended with people losing everything they had. "Where?" Seojin said. Kwan relayed the details. Old Town Scottsdale, side exit of the coffee shop, black Suburban. Jihai had caught a partial plate. Kwan's team was already running it through their network, not police databases, not DMV records, but the shadow network that Seojin's organization maintained across the Southwest. Surveillance contacts, street-level informants, traffic camera access in Scottsdale, Tempe, Phoenix, and Mesa. Within 45 minutes, they had a hit. The Suburban's plate matched a vehicle registered to a shell company called Desert Line Logistics. Kwan ran the shell company through 3 layers of corporate filings. The company was registered in Nevada. The registered agent was a law firm in Reno. The law firm's client list included, buried 4 levels deep in a web of subsidiaries and trusts, a name, Park Hyun-woo. Seojin stared at the screen. His cousin's name glowed in the blue light of the monitor. "Where is the vehicle now?" he asked. Kwan pulled up a traffic camera feed from South Mesa. The Suburban had been tracked to an industrial district, a cluster of warehouses and manufacturing buildings near the intersection of Baseline Road and Sawsalmon. One of the warehouses was registered to another Desert Line logistics subsidiary. Seo-jin stood up. 6 men, armed, Kwan drives. Kwan nodded. He made the calls. 20 minutes later, 3 black vehicles left Seo-jin's compound in Paradise Valley and drove south toward Mesa. Seo-jin sat in the front passenger seat of the lead vehicle. He did not speak. He did not check his phone. He stared straight ahead with the focus of a man who had reduced his entire universe to a single point: get her back. They arrived at the warehouse at 10:47 a.m. The building was beige concrete, windowless, surrounded by a chain-link fence with no security guard and no cameras. The Suburban was parked around back. Seo-jin got out of the car first. He was not carrying a weapon. He walked to the warehouse entrance, a heavy steel door, unlocked, and pushed it open. The interior was a large open space. Concrete floor, exposed steel beams, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and in the center of the room, Loretta. She was sitting in a metal folding chair. Her wrists were zip-tied in front of her. Her blazer was torn at the shoulder. A bruise was forming on her left cheekbone where she had been struck for fighting back. Her hair was loose, her twist out undone from the struggle. Her eyes were wide, but she was not crying. She was not screaming. She was furious. When Loretta saw Seo-jin walk through that door, something in her face shifted. Not gradually, instantly, from fury to relief, from fear to something that looked a lot like trust. Like whatever was about to happen, the fact that he was here meant she was going to be okay. Hyun-woo was standing behind her. 2 of his men flanked him on either side. He was dressed casually, gray sweater, dark jeans, sneakers, like he had planned this as a low-key Saturday errand. He had his hands in his pockets. He was smiling. "Cousin," Hyun-woo said, "thank you for coming so quickly. I was worried you might not care." Seo-jin's 6 men fanned out behind him, forming a silent wall of dark suits and controlled violence. Seo-jin himself stood in the center, hands at his sides, completely still. "Let her go," he said. "Not yet. We need to talk first." "We have nothing to talk about." "Actually, we do." Hyun-woo stepped around Loretta's chair and walked towards Seo-jin, maintaining a careful distance. "You have become compromised, Seo-jin. You know it. Kwan knows it. Everyone who has been watching you for the past 3 months knows it. You are distracted. Your judgment is clouded. You made a direct report role for a junior employee because you wanted an excuse to sit in a room with her twice a week. You assigned personal security to someone who has no connection to the organization. You told her about the operations room. You told a civilian the truth. "You sent the notes," Seo-jin said. "It was not a question." Hyun-woo tilted his head. "I created an opportunity. I gave her breadcrumbs, the basement-level reference, the propped-open door. I wanted to see what you would do when she found out. I wanted to see if you would handle her the way you should have, or if you would let your feelings override your judgment. And you let your feelings override your judgment, which is exactly what I told the elders in Seoul." "You spoke to the elders." "I did. I told them their hand-picked successor has fallen for a woman who has no place in our world. I told them the operation is at risk, and I offered them an alternative." "You?" "Me," Hyun-woo's smile widened. "I am giving you a choice, cousin. Step down from leadership of the network, voluntarily, quietly. Keep the company. I do not care about the tech firm. Just give me control of the real operation. Or," he glanced back at Loretta, "I demonstrate to the elders exactly how compromised you are by showing them what happens when liabilities are not addressed." Loretta's eyes were locked on Seo-jin. She could not fully follow what was being said, the implications, the layers, the politics of a world she had only glimpsed, but she understood the core of it. Hyun-woo was using her as leverage. She was the weapon pointed at Seo-jin, and the trigger was Seo-jin's own feelings for her. Seo-jin listened to every word his cousin said without blinking. When Hyun-woo finished, Seo-jin did not respond immediately. He turned to Loretta. "Are you hurt beyond what I can see?" he asked. She shook her head. He turned back to Hyun-woo. "You sent the notes. You led her to the sub-basement. You manufactured this entire situation to justify a power grab. You compromised the organization's security, exposed an operative facility to a civilian, and kidnapped an innocent person, all to position yourself as the responsible alternative to me. Hyun-woo shrugged. I did what was necessary. Seo-jin nodded. Then he said very calmly, Kwan. Kwan stepped forward and placed a tablet on a crate near the center of the room. The screen was lit. On it was a live video call showing 3 older Korean men sitting in a room with dark wood paneling and low lighting. Their faces were stern, lined with age and authority. These were the syndicate elders in Seoul, the 3 men whose approval Hyun-woo claimed to have, the 3 men whose blessing he said he had secured. They had been listening to every word. Seo-jin had activated the feed before he entered the warehouse. His phone had been transmitting the entire time, every sentence, every admission, every detail of Hyun-woo's confession. The notes, the manufactured breadcrumbs, the propped-open door, the kidnapping, all of it broadcast live to the men who actually held the power to decide who led the organization. Hyun-woo's smile disappeared. It did not fade. It vanished, like someone had reached into his face and pulled it out by the roots. The eldest man on the screen spoke in Korean. His voice was low and final, the kind of voice that did not need volume to carry weight. Kwan translated quietly for Loretta's benefit, though Seo-jin understood every word. Hyun-woo, you told us the operation was at risk because of Seo-jin's judgment. You did not tell us that you created the risk yourself. You manipulated a civilian. You exposed a secure facility. You kidnapped a woman to stage a confrontation. This is not leadership. This is desperation. The second elder spoke. You are relieved of all rank within the organization, effective immediately. You will return to Seoul within 48 hours. Your assets within the U.S. operation are frozen. If you resist these terms, the consequences will not be a conversation. Hyun-woo's 2 men looked at each other. Then they looked at the screen. Then they stepped away from Hyun-woo, putting clear distance between themselves and a man who had just become radioactive. They knew it was over. Everyone in the room knew it was over. Hyun-woo stood alone in the center of the warehouse, his face drained of color, his hands trembling at his sides. He looked at Seo-jin with something that was not anger anymore. It was recognition. The recognition that he had been outmaneuvered completely, and that his cousin had not needed to raise his voice or his hand to do it. Seo-jin did not look at him. He walked past Hyun-woo without a word, crossed the concrete floor, and knelt in front of Loretta. He pulled a knife from his pocket and cut the zip ties from her wrists. The plastic fell to the floor. He cupped her face gently with both hands and looked at the bruise forming on her cheekbone. His thumbs brushed her skin. His hands were shaking. It was the first time in the entire story, the first time in years, maybe in his entire adult life, that Seo-jin Park's hands shook. I am sorry, he said. His voice was quiet and raw. This is my fault. Loretta grabbed the front of his shirt with both fists and pulled him close. She pressed her forehead against his. She could feel his breath on her face. She could feel his pulse through the fabric under her hands. Get me out of here, she whispered. He helped her to her feet. He took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She leaned into him, and he put his arm around her, and they walked out of the warehouse together into the bright Arizona sun. In the car, Loretta was silent for a long time. She stared out the window at the desert landscape passing by, the dust and scrub and wide open sky. Seo-jin sat beside her. He did not touch her. He did not speak. He waited. Finally, without looking at him, she said, You came for me. Seo-jin stared straight ahead. I will always come for you. That is not a promise. That is just what is true. Loretta turned her head. She looked at his profile, the sharp jaw, the tense line of his mouth, the way his hands were still trembling slightly where they rested on his knees. She leaned her head against his shoulder and closed her eyes. For the first time in her entire life, Loretta Hayes felt completely, dangerously, illogically safe. 6 weeks later, Hyun-woo was gone, sent back to Seoul on a private flight 46 hours after the warehouse confrontation. His rank was stripped. His accounts were frozen. His name was removed from every operational document in the U.S. network. He was alive but powerless, which for a man like Hyun Woo was a punishment worse than anything physical. The anonymous notes stopped the day he left. The threat was neutralized. Seo Jin restructured everything. New security protocols, new internal vetting procedures designed by Kwan. The sub-basement operations room was dismantled and relocated to an off-site facility outside the city, a location known only to Seo Jin, Kwan, and 2 senior operatives. Hale Meridian Technologies continued to thrive publicly. They closed a massive acquisition deal with a financial analytics firm based in Greenwich, Connecticut, and the business press called it the most strategic move in the Southwest tech sector that year. Di-ho, the disgruntled lieutenant, was reassigned to a role with less access and more oversight. Mr. Yun, the logistics coordinator with the suspicious payments, was quietly removed from the organization after Kwan confirmed he had been feeding information to the San Jose rival. He was not harmed. He was simply cut off, bank access revoked, contacts severed, identity scrubbed from every internal system. He ceased to exist in Seo Jin's world, and that was enough. Loretta had a decision to make. She knew what Seo Jin was. She had seen his world from the inside, the surveillance feeds, the crates, the men in dark suits, the power plays and betrayals. She had been kidnapped because of him. She had a bruise on her cheekbone that took 2 weeks to fade because of him. She could walk away. She could take her career, her talent, her intelligence, and her peace and go build a life somewhere safe with someone normal. No one would blame her. She did not walk away. But she did not just accept everything either. Loretta Hayes was not that woman. She had never been that woman. She sat across from Seo Jin in his office on a Wednesday afternoon, not as an employee this time, but as something else, something they were still figuring out, and she laid out her terms. "If we are going to be something," she said, "I need 3 things." Seo Jin leaned back in his chair. "Tell me." 1, honesty, even when it is ugly. Even when you think it will scare me, you do not get to decide what I can handle. I decide that. He nodded. 2, my life stays mine. My career, my friendships, my identity. I am not a satellite orbiting your world. I have my own gravity. I would not want it any other way. 3, she paused. This one mattered the most. You work toward making the other side of your life smaller, not bigger. I am not asking you to become a saint overnight. I am asking you to become better, slowly, intentionally, because I am not building a future with someone who is moving in the wrong direction. Seo Jin was quiet for a long time. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression softened. Not weakened, softened, like a door opening in a room that had been locked for years. "Agreed," he said, "all 3. She studied his face. "You mean that?" "I have never meant anything more." Their first real date was not at a fancy restaurant in Paradise Valley. It was not at a rooftop bar with a view of the city. It was at a small, family-owned Korean restaurant in a strip mall in Chandler, Arizona. The kind of place with plastic-covered menus, fluorescent lights, and mismatched chairs. The kind of place that did not look like anything special from the outside, but served the best kimchi jjigae in the entire state. The elderly owner, a woman named Mrs. Cho, recognized Seo Jin the moment he walked in. She came out from behind the counter, grabbed his face with both hands, and called him by a childhood nickname that Loretta could not pronounce but immediately loved. Mrs. Cho pinched his cheek and scolded him in Korean for not visiting in 3 months. Loretta laughed so hard she nearly choked on her water. She had never seen him like this, without the armor, without the calculated stillness. He was just a man sitting in a plastic chair, eating soup, being fussed over by an old woman who had known him since he was a teenager. He looked younger, lighter, almost shy. He caught her staring and raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing," she said, grinning. "I just did not know you had a cheek-pinching grandma." "She is not my grandmother." "She pinched your cheek. She is your grandmother now." He almost laughed. The corner of his mouth twitched and he looked down at his soup to hide it. But Loretta saw it. She saw everything. After dinner, they walked through a quiet residential street nearby. The air was warm and dry, carrying the faint smell of desert sage. The Arizona sky stretched above them, wide and deep and full of stars. The kind of sky you only get away from city lights, the kind that makes you feel small and infinite at the same time. Seo-jin stopped walking. Loretta stopped too. "That night," he said, "outside the building when he kissed you." Loretta tilted her head. "What about it?" He turned to face her. The streetlight caught the angles of his face, the sharp lines of his jaw, the softness in his eyes that he showed no one else. "I need to replace that memory," he said. He kissed her. Slowly, his hand on the side of her neck, his thumb tracing her jawline. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer. It was not rushed. It was not desperate. It was the kind of kiss that rewrites everything that came before it. The kind that makes you forget every wrong mouth that ever touched yours. When they pulled apart, Loretta's eyes were still closed. She opened them slowly and whispered, "Better than the lobby." Seo-jin looked at her like she was the only thing in the entire world that mattered. "Nothing compares to you." They stood there for a long moment, forehead to forehead, breathing each other in. Two people who had spent their whole lives building walls finally standing in the rubble of them. 6 weeks after that, Loretta video called her sister Monique from the balcony of Seo-jin's penthouse. The Scottsdale skyline glowed behind her, all golden lights and dark mountains. She was wearing one of his oversized t-shirts and a pair of shorts, her natural hair loose around her shoulders, and she was smiling, not the polished, professional smile she gave the world, but the real one, the unguarded one, the one that reached her eyes and lived there. Monique answered on the first ring. She took one look at her sister and said, "Girl, you look different." Loretta laughed. "I feel different." "Different how? Different good." "Different, I need to flight to Arizona different." "Different good, really good." Monique leaned closer to the screen, her eyes narrowed. "Is he there?" From inside the penthouse, Seo-jin's voice carried through the open balcony door. "Tell your sister I said hello." Monique screamed. It was the kind of scream that could be heard 3 states away. Loretta held the phone at arm's length and laughed harder than she had laughed in years. Seo-jin appeared in the background of the frame, carrying 2 glasses of red wine, looking like a man who had just discovered that happiness was an option he had never previously considered. He set one glass on the balcony railing next to Loretta and stood behind her, his hand resting on the small of her back. Monique was fanning herself dramatically. "Loretta Marie Hayes, you better not mess this up." Loretta looked over her shoulder at Seo-jin. He looked down at her. The look that passed between them did not need words. It was the kind of look that contains an entire future, messy and complicated and imperfect and real and absolutely, stubbornly, defiantly worth it. Loretta turned back to the screen. "I won't." She meant it. Loretta Hayes grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, believing that safety was something you earned through hard work and vigilance. She built walls. She built plans. She built a life that depended on no one but herself, because everyone who was supposed to stay had left, and she decided at 9 years old that she would never be caught off guard again. Seo-jin Park grew up between Seoul and Manhattan, believing that love was a vulnerability, a crack in the armor, a weapon that the world would use against you if you were foolish enough to let anyone close. He inherited an empire built on control, and he ran it by feeling nothing. They were both right, and they were both wrong. Because the truth is, love is not safe. It is not predictable. It does not wait for you to be ready or for your life to be clean or for the timing to make sense. It walks into your building on a Monday morning in a camel blazer and gold hoops, and it dares you to stay the same. It sits across from you in your own office and asks you to be better. It grabs your shirt in a warehouse and whispers, "Get me out of here," and you realize that every wall you ever built was not protecting you. It was just keeping you alone. Loretta stayed. Seo-jin let her in. And in a world built on power and silence and control, that was the bravest thing either of them had ever done. Now, if this story made you feel something real, if you were rooting for Loretta and Seo-jin from the very first chapter, drop a comment right now and tell me what moment got you. Was it when he watched her from that window? When he said, "Tell me, not HR"? When his hands were shaking as he cut those zip ties? Or was it that kiss under the Arizona stars? Tell me. I want to know. And if you are still sitting here without liking this video and subscribing to this channel, honestly, you are hurting my feelings at this point. Hit that button. I will see you in the next one. John.